Welcome to episode 116 of the Sports Geek podcast. This week I chat with Gareth Capon from Grabyo about the power of social video.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals.
And now, here's your host who feels wrong when he listens to radio now, Sean Callanan.
Thanks very much, DJ Joel. Yes, I do feel wrong, and I actually don't listen to radio that much at all. My car battery died recently, and I drive my car that often, and my car radio is currently locked, and I haven't got around to actually fixing it because I just don't find myself listening to radio because I'm a podcast listener, as you are, and you are listening to the Sports Geek podcast, either on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or my favourite Pocket Casts, which is my favourite podcast app. My name is Sean Callanan. I am host of the Sports Geek podcast. You can contact me via Twitter at Sean Callanan or at Sports Geek or the old-fashioned way, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. This week's episode, I catch up with Gareth Capon all the way from London. I met Gareth in 2014 at DS London, Digisport London, an event run by Daniel McLaren, a former guest when I was in London in 2014. And at that point, Grabyo was just starting out. And now we catch up with Gareth a couple of years on and to see where social video has gone and how they are working with both broadcasters, rights holders, and teams using Grabyo. So here's my chat with Gareth Capon from Grabyo. Very happy to welcome someone who I met at the DS London back in 2014, Gareth Capon from Grabyo, CEO of Grabyo. Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast.
Thank you, Sean.
As I said, we met at Daniel McLaren's DS London back in 2014, and at that point, Grabyo was really still in its infancy. Do you want to take us a little bit of background into your background and how the Grabyo story started?
Sure, yeah, happy to do that. So you're right. When we first met, Grabyo was probably a few months old. I had recently joined to head up the company. I previously was working at Sky, the UK broadcaster, and used to run product development for the mobile applications within the company, as well as a number of sort of social TV and investment, corporate sort of startup investment activities within Sky. So what was sort of the background to the business at Grabyo was that the company was first launched, interestingly, as a consumer-focused proposition, providing the capability for TV audience, actually in the UK, to fans to grab moments of television and share it with their friends across social media. So it was ran with Sky, was sort of my first introduction to the business as a campaign for Britain and Ireland's Next Top Model. Was a really successful format, but as you would imagine, this is hard enough for television, but let alone for sports, clearing the rights for that campaign was really tricky. And so, but what was evident was that the demand for that type of content, so i.e. these sort of short moments of TV shared across social platforms in real time, was genuinely interesting from a fans and a consumer perspective. But from a business perspective, Grabyo needed to be focused on the enterprise rather than the consumer, i.e. the people that owned and controlled those rights. So quickly, Grabyo was refocused as a business that provided a set of tools and capabilities, cloud-based sort of video platform for rights holders, broadcasters, and anyone that had owned content that wanted to distribute that content, i.e. video content, into social platforms in real time. Obviously, the most prolific and interesting format for that type of content is obviously sport, given that it drives so much conversation on social media and is so relevant live, i.e. people want to watch it live and experience it live. And since then, Grabyo has been focused on providing a set of services to broadcasters, rights holders, events, and even some athletes and individuals to allow them to distribute video content in real time across multiple social networks. So that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and most recently, as we probably going to talk about, we've launched a live streaming service as one of Facebook's partners for live streaming.
So just to take the listeners through it, it picks up the broadcast feed, and you can effectively be grabbing snippets and sections of the video, and then quickly hitting which platforms you want to go, and it will build out and create that video natively for all those different platforms. Is that pretty much the short description of what Grabyo enables rights holders to do?
That's right, and it's a little bit more than that. So in addition to taking live feeds, which could be from broadcast, or they could be behind the scenes, they could be events, anything which can be streamed live can be pushed into the Grabyo platform. But we also support clips created on mobile. We have a mobile app where you can shoot and edit content on the phone directly, and actually we support on-demand formats of content too. So many of our customers, let's take an example, La Liga use the platform, Grabyo platform regularly for their archive. So they'll take moments of archive footage. They'll use Grabyo to reconfigure that footage into a shorter clip, or maybe they'll cut a square aspect ratio clip, which is specifically focused for Instagram, or even a vertical video clip, which obviously is perfectly suited for Snapchat. And then they'll share those directly from the Grabyo to their fans. So although the primary use case is certainly around live and live events, we actually see a number of partners using the platform as a mechanism to create social, or mobile optimized video from on-demand footage as well as live. But as you would imagine, the most interesting pieces and the most unique piece of the platform is when something is happening right now, and using Grabyo to get those pieces of content, those video clips out to multiple networks in a matter of seconds when the action is happening.
So coming from a TV and a broadcaster background, and like bringing Grabyo into the space at that time, like, we're always, there's always a discussion around broadcaster rights, digital rights, where social fits. You must have had some really interesting discussions, both on the broadcaster side and the digital rights holder side on, just getting over that hurdle of getting people to use your product, because you would have had the traditional TV broadcaster saying, no, we don't want this content shared on these networks. We've paid this big money. How's that conversation been over the last couple of years?
It's definitely changing, and quite quickly. I think there's always been this concern, and rightly so, from a rights holder or a broadcaster perspective. Certainly from a rights holder perspective, when you look at where a majority of their revenues come from, it comes from traditional TV and broadcast deals, and the value of those contracts, particularly within sport, are really significant. Hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. So there's clearly a concern to make sure you protect the value of those rights and give the value back to the broadcasters who are buying them, and therefore activating and executing them within given territories. But on the flip side, you've got to, if you look at what's happening from an audience perspective, or just the general macro trends around video consumption, it's moving increasingly towards smaller devices. Much of that has been driven by social networks, and therefore, if you don't have a presence on these platforms, you potentially miss out on two things. One, the opportunity to engage an audience who is looking for content, wants to watch that content, share that content on those platforms. But secondly, if you look at what's going to happen from a global perspective, there's going to be 3 billion more smartphones on the planet in the next 3 to 5 years. And that is an enormous new audience of potential customers and fans for this content. And if your video is not available in a mobile optimized format on the places where people spend their time, which is increasingly social networks, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., then you risk basically missing out on the growth of the next generation of fans. We definitely don't think that TV is going away, and we actually think in many cases social video can be incredibly additive towards a traditional broadcast experience. The best example for us from last year was Wimbledon's most successful clip that they shared on social platforms, which was a 15-second clip of David Beckham catching the ball in the crowd in the Royal Box. That's not a traditionally valuable piece of TV content, but was viewed more than 10 million times on social media. So in that way, you've taken an existing format, an existing TV broadcast, and you've created an enormous amount of new value from those rights. And that, for us, is the most interesting thing, that both from a commercial perspective, but also from a traditional TV perspective too. That's 10 million people who found out about Wimbledon that day, were probably encouraged to go and watch the tournament, started to engage and share content personally related to Wimbledon. That has to be valuable to the rights holder, but also to the broadcasters who are showing that tournament on TV. Yeah,
and it is very much the piece I want to pick up on is you could have you will miss out on that next generation if you're not in this space. Because if you can't use short videos, social platforms on these multiple platforms to tell the story, to highlight your athletes, to let people know about your team, there could be a whole generation that just completely miss your sport because they are mobile first, and you want to tease them in and then bring them back to the TV because of what they're seeing, and it's very it's very interesting watching the different leagues and the different approaches. We look at the NBA that's pretty much allowing all of their content appear on all platforms and even letting fan-driven content drive it, and then you see other sports that are having that playing that whack-a-mole approach of trying to shut down all these different avenues for fans to see content. It's from what you can see is fans want the content, so it's best if the league provides that and then looks to commercialise both that content but also drive more eyeballs back to the big screen TV.
Yeah, we agree, completely. I think if the demand wasn't there from fans, then the content wouldn't be consumed and watched and shared. People are spending so much time on mobile, in particular now, that if you as you say, if you don't have a presence on these platforms, you risk missing out and competing for attention, and therefore missing out and being relevant, and that damages all of your potential revenue streams, whether that's TV or advertising or sponsorship in the future. And from a demographics perspective, you look at a platform like Snapchat in the US, where 1 in 2 people in the US under the age of 25 are on Snapchat daily. It's a place where a significant proportion of that demographic spends their time every day. And I think Snapchat's interesting in the way that they've started to create new formats around video specifically for that audience. I think Live Stories is a wonderful product for sport. The ability to combine content which has been created by fans with a really strong narrative and a story arc across a particular game or an event, but then combine that with content and video coming from the event itself, I think is a really genuinely interesting new way to be a sports fan and engage in sport in that way. So for us, we encourage people to explore what these platforms represent, but also just looking at the scale of the audience. We've from our own perspective, we've grown to now billions of views a year within the Grabyo platform from a standing start in 2 years. There's no other media platform that's giving any rights holder or broadcaster that kind of growth. And I think from that perspective alone, it's impossible to ignore it.
And it was a bit of a perfect storm for you with moving on, getting premium product in sport and live TV product, and then Facebook pretty much pushing their chips in on the video space, because video is the battleground now, and you've got Facebook pushing hard, you've got the Snapchat charging from behind. How much success have you guys had with your partnership with Facebook?
Yeah, it's been a great partnership. We also have strong partnerships with Twitter and the other social platforms too. But I think that sort of two things are evident from what's happened with Facebook with regards to video. One, obviously, the scale of their platform. It's 1.6 billion users and counting, as well as an additional 400 million users on Instagram. Both platforms of which support video. And I think there's been a couple of really major moments in the development of that experience. One, the obvious one, is autoplay. It is the most important shift in product format for video with regards to mobile and social platforms, because they've created a format which drives so much more engagement and viewing than ever before. Just having that moving image in a social feed, it completely transforms the way that people consume that content. And there may be arguments for about the way that Facebook counts its views, or whether videos are being viewed without audio, without sound. But actually, the numbers speak for themselves. The growth has been phenomenal, and we don't expect that to continue. I think that the most recent change, obviously, is probably the most fascinating of all, which is the move towards supporting live video. So the big difference from a live video experience on a social platform with in comparison with a traditional TV platform or OTT service is that you've got inherent viral distribution within the platform. When you set something live, you have an audience for it. Those audiences start watching. Their friends are notified and can see that someone they're connected with and they trust is engaging, or in watching that event or sports match or whatever it might be, and then are encouraged to join in as well. And an example from last week with La Liga, they did a live event for the launch of La Liga for Sports to a Facebook page which had 12,000 followers. By the end of the broadcast, a 40 minute broadcast, we had 80,000 people watching. So you've taken a live event which is being published to an organic audience of only 12,000 people, of which you would assume only a fraction were probably watching, But yet 80,000 people, nearly 6, 7, 8 times that audience ended up viewing the event. And that's very difficult to do on any other media platforms with regards to live.
Yeah, and even just recently, soccer player Alex Morgan pulled out Facebook Live and showed some of the Orlando Pride game, and I think it had over 300,000 views. So it's it's just one. It shows how much Facebook is pushing live as a product, and I guess it's going to be interesting to see what kind of content gets pushed out on that platform. I don't know if we're actually going to be seeing more athletes broadcasting games, because that's going to be another thorny issue for broadcasters. But what are some of so we've talked a lot about how Grabyo is used with the rights holders and leagues. There's a lot of people who listen who work in the team space. What offering and where does Grabyo fit for the team as opposed to the league and the rights holder?
Sure, we work with a number of teams, football, Premiership football teams in La Liga, cricket teams in the UK, some rugby teams. And actually the interesting thing is that the first conversation you tend to have with a team will focus on the fact that they say, well, we don't have any rights. The rights are owned by a broadcaster, or maybe they come back to us after a period of time. But if you actually look at what the experience of running a team is, the amounts of opportunities for content are really significant, whether that's under 21 games or B team games which are not published live on TV, whether it's breaking news around the club, whether it's aspects from the training ground, whether it's the inside story of what's happening at the club, whether it's the press conferences. It's all of these things are relevant to fans, and if they're delivered in the right way, on the right platforms and at the right time, they have a huge amount of value. One of the very simple things we started doing with a number of the clubs is just doing live clips or live streams in the warm-ups to games. So when fans are active on social platforms, they're following their team, they want to know who's in the team, who's playing today, what's happening, what's the atmosphere like at the stadium. And those clips will do hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of views. And it's because you've got this inherent audience sitting there active on these platforms at that time, particularly when you have an international or global audience, because they're the people who may never get to go to the stadium. So that level of engagement with the club is in a digital way is their sort of primary form of engagement with the club directly, rather than having that experience being delivered via a broadcaster. So for us, we think that the team opportunity is huge, and that as all teams become sort of media platforms in their own right and have an ability to communicate directly with their own fans, the experience in both growing that audience is a great opportunity, but also creates interesting new sponsorship and commercial opportunities as well for that club, where we know that the sort of diversification of revenue streams and looking for new revenue from commercial deals is important. And this is the scale of distribution and sort of scale of consumption on social platforms means this is a valuable asset if it's created and exploited in the right way. So can you set up do a post-game show and set up your current TV setup and then plug that into Grabyo to either do clips or push it through to Facebook Live, so to have that studio experience into Facebook Live? That's right. It can be a whole range of things. If I look at a club like Southampton Football Club who we work with, they'll take a live feed from their press conferences and they'll take clips from that or stream that live. They'll use our mobile application to create clips and edit clips on the phone, and we'll probably add live streaming to our mobile capability in the coming weeks and months. They'll go out and have people out and about with, whether it's with a camera or just a mobile phone, to capture content, which then could be sort of quickly uploaded to Grabyo and organised and then distributed through their social channels. And as you say, with other clubs, we've done some work with Arsenal in the past where they've had a studio show, and they've created a studio show either before the match, during the match, after the game. Again, all very simple to do, relatively low cost, and because you've got this audience which is available on social platforms. We're starting with Facebook. We'll add YouTube and the other social platforms for live streaming as well in time. You can go and communicate directly with them, and you can create new formats and new assets at relatively low cost, and certainly a fraction of the cost that it would be to do in a traditional TV sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with, the battle now for live video. As little as 3 years ago, to do a live stream of anything there was partners out there, and there was big hardware costs and software costs and all of that kind of stuff, and now that cost is getting cheaper and cheaper. So what are some of the options now that you've got with Grabyo now, that being a Facebook Live partner in the recent F8 conference? So what does it mean to be a Facebook Live partner, and how does it work for you guys?
So the first thing is, obviously we were given access to all of the the APIs and the live platform capabilities from Facebook ahead of the launch, as they'd asked us to be one of the launch partners, which was great. What it meant is that we've built a very simple system within Grabyo, whereas if you have a feed, coming from an encoder or a broadcast TV feed, whatever it may be, we've set up the system that you can publish that live to multiple Facebook pages in a really simple and controlled way. You can monitor, you can ensure the stream is working correctly, you can start it and stop it easily, and obviously using the rest of our platform, you can cut highlights, the key moments from that live event in real time, and publish those out to Facebook and other platforms if you wish. So now we're working with Facebook directly on enhancing that capability, building out sort of new services which will sit on top of that live experience, be those data integrations or automation around highlights or clips. All of these things will probably come in the future, but for us it was the ability to provide an obvious extension to our existing platform. We were already working with live content and feeds, but it was predominantly for clips and short form sort of highlights. Now we've got an equally simple ability for somebody to go live on Facebook, and we're seeing significant use of that already, whether that's Fox Sports in the US or with La Liga, some of the other clubs. And actually, I think the US football example that you mentioned earlier is a great example. I think the chance to go live and use the distribution reach and power of the talent, of the players, of the athletes, or musicians, etc., I think is a wonderful opportunity, and will become a real focus actually for these platforms over time, because often the athletes have greater reach and greater engagement than the rights holders of the broadcasters themselves. And so if they're used in that way and they want to distribute a specific game or a match to their own fans, they may start building effectively global audiences using their own channels, and they may become sort of TV channels of the future.
Well, there's every chance of that, and I mean that was a big discussion point, especially with the NFL game that was up for grabs. With your experience and sort of playing in the video space, all the rumours and all the everyone was saying that it was going to be Facebook taking on that NFL game, and then sort of out of the blue, Twitter came and bought that NFL game. What was your take on both those negotiations, and where do you think Twitter will go with broadcasting an NFL game?
I think it's a good deal for Twitter, actually. I think that it may have been a surprise to some people, but you look at their long-standing relationship with the NFL, particularly with regards to Amplify. That's a relationship which has been in place for a long time, and the NFL is one of the most popular sports on Twitter with regards to engagement and reach and tweet volumes, etc. So in that sense, it certainly made sense for the domestic market. I also think from the NFL's perspective, they've now got an opportunity to do two things. The first is to test what a small screen, mobile first live sort of interactive live experience looks like. Who watches it? How long do they watch it for? What do they watch? Who are these people? Do they, does the interactivity matter or not? Does it matter that it's on a small screen or not? I think all of these things are great for the NFL to understand. And also you're talking to an audience of 300 million active users and potentially another 300-400 million as I talked about, logged out users for Twitter. If you're the NFL and you're looking to build your audience globally, which is a clear stated objective for the league, then partnering up with one of the large social platforms to do that makes perfect sense. Why Twitter and not Facebook? I don't know the detail. I assume that they couldn't reach they reached a commercial deal with Twitter and they didn't reach one with Facebook. But I think that the overall objectives are probably somewhat similar. I.e., you want to understand consumption and the experience on a small screen driven by social distribution. You can potentially connect with a new audience. We've talked a lot about millennials and the younger demographic. These are the people who spend time on platforms such as Twitter and use them regularly. But I actually think the global opportunity is also interesting. Do you see that this is a mechanism for people in Southeast Asia or Japan or Europe to start watching these games because it's available for free on a platform where they spend their time? notwithstanding some of the challenges about the timing of the games. Clearly, Thursday night isn't a perfect time for an international audience. But that, to me, is the most interesting thing. We know, where are the users? How are they engaging? How long for? And therefore, what does the commercial value look like? And that, if it works for Twitter, then it's something you'd expect them to do more of and be more aggressive in the rights market over time.
Yeah, it is an interesting one because, we are moving from a time where all the social networks were, asking for premium content, and now we're actually getting to a point where they are paying for that premium content, whether it's Snapchat doing deals around their live stories and sharing the revenue with people like the NCAA and also the NFL with the Super Bowl, to Twitter buying a game. Social media platforms are being now seen as traditional media, and it sort of does shake up the landscape a little bit.
I think that, as with everything, the interest and the dollars tend to follow the eyeballs. So if you've got millions, if not now billions, of consumers spending an increasing amount of their time on these platforms, then whether it's the content from a right sort of broadcaster's perspective or the dollars from an advertising or sponsorship perspective, that's where you want to be. The growth in sort of mobile and digital advertising revenue doesn't slow down, and mobile is still the fastest growing sector of the market and accelerating. In almost every other part of the media market is flat or declining as of now. So with that in mind, if you're looking further forward, whether that's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, you can see the landscape's going to be very different. Most content will be, if not all content and video, will be delivered digitally. There'll be a mix of distribution between different platforms and screens. And from our perspective, we're pretty screen agnostic. We don't necessarily think that the TV is the most important screen, but we think it's one of many that exist in a consumer's life, and that you move between those screens based on context and interest and demand at a particular time, and that one is not necessarily better than the other, that all are important. But right now, there's obviously a big gap between the revenue and the business models associated with traditional television versus the other digital, mobile, social platforms. But we definitely expect that gap to close, and therefore there's going to be a lot of value created on these new platforms. So people who are active and participate early are likely to be, take a lion's share of that benefit as that transition occurs over the next few years.
Yeah, definitely. I did want to sort of finish off with one question. Sort of just your perspective of starting a tech media startup, out of London, outside of Silicon Valley, and building that, and I guess building it, from a London base in Europe, and then pushing into the US market and making those partnerships with Facebook and Twitter and pushing into the US market. How have you found that experience coming from London, and what's the startup scene like there to support your growth?
London has a great startup scene. It's very active. It's certainly the undisputed startup capital of Europe for sure. There is access to capital. There's access to talent. Developer talent, engineering talent. From across Europe. We've got a pretty multicultural team. Guys from Spain and France, and even Malaysia and Thailand work in the company, which is great. But London's is a great place to travel from, whether it's access to continental Europe or the States or Asia. But actually, when you look at our business, we've built a cloud-based software platform. We can deploy our platform anywhere in the world. It can be used anywhere in the world. We're currently running an event with Fashion Week in Sao Paulo, in Brazil. We've got clients in Spain, we've got clients in Asia, we've got clients in North America. So a lot of the challenge is as much the management of your customers and providing great service to them when they could be all around the world, as opposed to actually the challenge of building a startup here. We like being based in London, but we do expect to grow internationally and put people sort of boots in the ground in some other markets. We've got someone in Singapore now, someone in Spain, but the US will come next, I think. But from an engineering development perspective, we would certainly we plan to keep that here, and I think there's real efficiencies in having your development team centrally located.
Well, thank you very much. Where can people find you and find out more about Grabyo online?
Sure, very simple. It's just grabyo.com, which is grabyo.com, and you'll find us on Twitter and Facebook, as you'd expect. But please feel free to get in touch. We'd love to hear from any of your audience who wants to know more. Well,
you already do work with a few of the people who have been guests. Tom Halls at Formula E is using Grabyo to be sharing clips from the Formula E stuff. So looking forward to catching up with him soon and hearing more about it. But thanks for coming on the podcast.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Really good to talk to you.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign-up-now.
Thanks again to Gareth Capon from Grabyo. You can send him a tweet. His tweet is much like mine. It's his name, Gareth Capon, Capon. Send him a tweet, tell him that you're listening to the podcast. And if you've got any questions about Grabyo or about just the social video and where video is moving, I guess the question of the podcast of the day is, how has your consumption of video changed over the past few years? I know myself, 2 or 3 years ago, I was primarily watching video on the desktop, and more the video now I'm consuming is either in-app, in team or league apps, and far more video content being consumed on social, especially as we discussed. Facebook pushing its video products so heavily. I recently hosted a Facebook Live Q&A session on my first Facebook page. That's facebook.com, Sean Callanan Speaks. And I think it's going to be a semi-regular feature. I will be testing out different products to be able to do that. I recorded that exclusively on my phone. I tried to do it via the Sports Geek page, but the page manager app kept crashing when I went to go and do it. And I know if you go and watch the video, it sort of does. I do talk about the fragmentation of the platforms. I set up a Facebook event to tell people about it, and then I ended up running the video on the Sean Callanan page, and so I had people commenting on the posts in the event and on the video. So there is a little bit of plumbing and technical hitches to get past, but I think once people know where the live product is, and it was very easy for people who were liking the page that they did see it. It obviously gets that free past edge ranking. A lot of people get to see it, and it was relatively easy to run to answer questions. Occasionally, if I stopped on a comment, it was difficult to sort of jump back into the comment thread. So there's a few things that obviously Facebook's got to work on to make the experience better for the broadcaster, and I think that's where things like Grabyo, being able to use a dedicated feed, whether it be from production cameras and that kind of thing, and pulling that kind of high production value content into the Facebook Live product, I think that's where the game will be lifted. So Facebook's got its, I think it's called a Mevo camera, a camera specifically built for Facebook Live. I know I did about 40 minutes on my video, and my phone was at about 4% by the end of the session. So, you know, there are, as other cameras become and other opportunities and resources to be able to use Facebook Live are available, I think that's going to be something that's going to be, you know, more available for teams and not just pulling out the camera and recording something live. I think if we can put on supers and have a bit of higher production value, and that's one of the things that Grabyo offers as a live streaming service, I think that would be very beneficial. The other thing that's relatively new, Snapchat, at least in Australia, but it is going now around the world, creating your own Snapchat filters, and that's being rolled out worldwide. I know it's been in the US for a little while. It's now available in Australia, and I think, you know, it's about $100 to cover a stadium. So there's definitely an opportunity there to either integrate with sponsors, but really just to do some cool fan engagement activities and putting your brand and feel on the fans' Snapchat accounts, and that's the thing. The Snapchat is really a fan broadcast platform, firstly and foremost. So really interested to see. We've set up a Snapchat filter on Adelaide Oval for the A-League Grand Final. So I'm recording this before that. It'll be interesting to see what the stats come through. I did play around with it, just setting up a simple Snapchat filter around the Sports Geek office last week. Very easy to set up, very easy to set up the map and draw the lines, and I set mine up for $5, so it wasn't too hard. So I would say test out maybe your training facilities, maybe around big announcements, those kind of things. So for $5 you can put some branding on your own Snapchat account just for special announcements. So I think that's worthwhile doing. I'm trying to start, and I did this a couple of episodes putting in recommendations for books and podcasts. And this week's one I'm going to promote and tell people to listen to is one produced by ESPN. It's not a small player in the sports digital industry, but they've brought out a five episode podcast series, sort of Netflix style, which I really like as a format. And it's called Dunkumentaries, and it's, as the name suggests, it's documentaries documenting the world of dunks and NBA dunks in specifically. So give it a listen. If you're an NBA fan, you'll really enjoy it. But it just shows you the opportunity for sports to dive in a little bit deeper on a niche topic and on an evergreen topic. I think that's really important. It's not the standard 30 to 40 minute talk about what's happening this week on the game with the club, that kind of thing. It's not that news type of feel. It's more in the ESPN 30 for 30 deep dive on a particular topic. And so I think give it a listen just for its production value and what it produces. And I'm a strong believer in the content is pretty good. But put your thinking caps on and have a listen on and think about how you, with your team or your league, could produce something like that. And again, it's obviously sits very well in that history space and looking back at big events. So Dunkumentaries, there'll be links in the show notes. But if you look for it in all good podcast stores, you should be able to find it. I did recommend the Documentaries podcast in the Sports Biz Slack group, the ever-growing Sports Biz Slack group. So if you're not a member, please join up, sportsgeekhq.com. I've been absolutely over the moon with the amount of response and the amount of people that are joining in and conversing. We've now got channels on digital. I'm just about to set up a channel specifically for CRM and talking about data and the analytics around CRM, as that's a growing space. And we've got people like Russell Scabetti and Ray Pimenta. I hope I got your name right, Ray, from the Dolphins. And people joining from all over the world. So if you want to connect with people in the US and the UK and Australia that are working at the coalface, working in sports, it's a really good place to share discussions, share what you're doing. Love to hear the different campaigns that are being rolled out and different technologies that are being trialled around the world. Please join the Sports Biz Slack group. Just simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/Slack and you'll get an invite and sign up to Slack. And for those of you who are still trying to figure out how to use Slack, it's a mobile. I treat it as a mobile first product. I've got it installed on my phone. It does have a desktop version, which is very useful. I use it across Sports Geek, Chunky Media, and a few clients. I'm part of their Slack. So it's a really good communications tool, sort of cross channels and keeping people in the loop. So it's a really good exercise for you to test out Slack. I'm highly recommending it as a way for you to manage and keep in touch with your digital department and just reduce the amount of emails that you might have. So that's it for this week. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. The sounds of the game this week come from Anzac Day. It's one of the biggest games of the year in the AFL on a day of national pride. I was asked in the Facebook Q&A whether Collingwood would beat Essendon, being a Collingwood fan, and I said with a little bit of confidence, Collingwood have not been travelling well, but the sounds of the game is the two teams running out under the same banner. Normally they run out via separate banners, but as a show of solidarity around Anzac Day, they run out under the same banner. So that's the sounds of the game at the end of the show. If you have been listening, please send me a tweet at Sean Callanan, send me an email, let me know what your thoughts are of the podcast. And until next time, cheers.
Like the Sports Geek podcast? Find us on facebook.com/sportsgeek. Want to understand Facebook advertising options? Go to sportsgeekhq.com/FB ads. Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes.